There we go. Good day, and thank you for tuning in to this new episode of the Microdose Diet. So my guest today is Jessica Weisz. Hi, Jessica.
Hello.
So I asked Perplexity, who is Jessica Weisz? So this is the answer, and I'm gonna read. Jessica Weisz is an investor, entrepreneur, caregiver, and rule breaker who is passionate about humanizing workplaces, achieving work-life balance, promoting gender equality, and challenging conventional thinking in business and society. She is known for her work in enabling others to thrive by questioning societal norms and advocating for change. Jessica Weisz has a diverse background in business, including experience at McKinsey, I never know to pronounce that, and as the founder of Rule Breaker. So we did forget to mention that you are also a venture partner at Stand Up Ventures, a former BMO employee, and most importantly, a friend of mine. So
Obviously, that's like that's what I say when anybody asks, who are you? I'm friend of Peggy's.
that's the most important. So I think he did a pretty good job, actually.
Pretty good. It scraped my LinkedIn well.
I know, and it kind of put it very comprehensively. So my name is Peggy Van de Plassche, and I'm a former banker and venture capitalist. I know, speak, and write about the benefits of alternative medicines, such as microdosing psilocybin, for personal and professional growth. So I created the Microdose Diet, which is a 90-day plan for success and happiness. You can follow my work on Substack, LinkedIn, YouTube, and everywhere. So Jess, let's get going. Thank you so much for being here today, now that we know a bit more about you. So the first thing I want to ask, and I met you 15 years ago, so a few months ago. So when you were in your 20s, who did you think you'd be by now? And how does it compare actually with where you are right now? What's the gap, if there is any?
It's like a 180. It's like I went this way and I thought I was going this way and I was like, woo. I mean, in my 20s, I was with someone that I then married, and was full on corporate, right? So like I thought I'd be living Midtown at that point, by now at 40, Midtown Toronto, couple of kids, and proper like executive, like would have the office finally and not have to sit in that cubicle in a Bay Street tower, and like just doing my thing, right? Like I would be a VP or something. I'd have a team of 40, 50, 500, I don't know, and just on that track.
So
Yeah.
we heard in the Perplexity bio that you're doing different. Doesn't mean better or worse, just mean different. So you have the two kids.
Yeah.
That is the only thing. The rest is pretty different. Do you want to elaborate a bit more on the gap and what's what it means for you as well?
Yeah. Yes, I have the two kids, although with now a different partner. So that was a change. But with that also was a time of life where it was I extracted myself from, I'll call it that, the things that people pat me on the head for. So I remember when I left BMO and I was working on this very high profile project that included the CFO and other senior executives. Obviously, I was the most junior person in the room. And I remember him looking over and sort of saying, "We look forward to welcoming you back." And I thought I thought to myself, oh my God, never in a million years, right? But anyways, that was a turning point. So now I am how do I even now? See, now I have to it's like, how do you even jump from from one to the next? Now yes, I am doing venture capital stuff a couple days a week. I have also been working on Rule Breaker. So Rule Breaker for me is a reflection of the transformation that I've gone through. And I don't like using the word transformation, but I think it's probably fairly true, which is recognizing that life exists outside of the career, and integrating caregiving and self-care into what I think is a well-rounded life, and truly what is, I would say, I don't like using this word either, but a successful life, right? So we often talk about success at all costs, or what are the costs to your success? And usually people will say, oh, I spent less time with my kids, or my health wasn't as good, or I, wasn't able to pursue my passion of drumming. And to me, I would say, well, then that wasn't successful. That wasn't what I would call a successful. And so I'm exploring that with Rule Breaker, and working with folks that feel similarly, particularly those that are struggling to find the harmony between career, caregiving, and self-care.
Yeah. Well, and it's a very westernized definition of success to put everything on the career. And when I say westernized, I should even say North American. If you go to France, if you go to any networking event and you start talking after 2 minutes about what you do for a living, people will take a glass and just leave right away, because it's very rude to lead any conversation with someone you don't know with your job. North America is the other way around. It's like it's the first, it's your, okay, that's where I am on the totem pole. I'm important.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm not important, but you know what I mean. And so it's again, unfortunately, when you look at success, it's a word that we bastardized in North America. So now it has almost a negative connotation, but being successful mean exactly what you're saying. A career you're happy with, whatever is your definition. A life that with your partner, with your children, or no children, or no partner, whatever is. And that's the thing, that because we try to have one definition of success for everyone.
Yeah.
It's exactly the opposite. It's individual definition of success, even between you and I, or you and Dan, your partner. The definition of success will be different, and
Totally.
that's fine. We're all different beings, and that's the way it should be. So I think you're absolutely right. It's like that vision, that is a tunnel vision, is absolutely wrong and misleading. And that brings me to my second question, which is, in the transition you made, which is a very courageous transition. I'm here to testify of that. It's not an easy transition. So what limiting belief did you have to overcome to really be to go above and beyond this conditioned image of who you have been, this midterm executive woman, which I'm sure was an image you built yourself, but that was also coming from society and everywhere. And how did you manage to drop this conditioning?
So in terms of how I dropped the conditioning, I think it was obviously a process. And one of the things that I reflected, for me, it happened when I had kids. And one of the things when I reflected after I had my second was that there were some sort of concrete stages, right? So initially I was almost in denial, like I could do it all, right? I played into now the trope of the woman, which is to be both the senior executive and the Instagram or the lunches, right? And then I hit burnout, right? And then I realized, no, I'm going to keep trying in almost protest. Right. So you're telling me I can't do it? Well, because, well, screw you, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, burnout hit again. And then there was this resentment period, I almost call it, where I was just angry. I was angry at the system, like, screw the man, any old white man that I crossed. I almost you see him at the coffee shop and I'm like, screw you, patriarchy. Right. And then there was a softening period. And what I began to understand, or not even understand, but really entrenched myself was the system overall. And that in a lot of the system sets to make me feel like it's my fault.
Exactly.
Right? I don't have enough confidence. And then therefore, that's why I'm not a senior executive. Or I need to do better personal branding. And then that's why I'm not a senior executive. I'm like, no, I have children who need to be watered daily, Like they don't grow themselves. I
Yeah.
cannot just put the on the irrigation system, right? I could, right, and hire a nanny where I know that is, a thing where parents who have to travel frequently, right? There aren't there, but I wanted to be there to make the 5 p.m. dinner, right? Like we eat like old people on, the golden hour or whatever it's called, where we eat at 5 and because they have to eat, and then you got to do stories and you got to do bath and you got to do that every night. And so for me, it was softening into the realization that this is a requirement in life. And so I accepted that. And I would say to your other question around self-limiting beliefs,
Yeah.
I still have that. And I would say, sort of wonder, when you kind of are in an office and you look around and you're like, does everyone else see that like this guy's a jerk, right? And like and you're like, but and then finally you speak with a coworker and you're like,
It's me or
like,
is a jerk? Yeah.
and then like, yeah, he's such a jerk. And I'm like, oh my God, I thought it was the only one. And then you like start to realize that everyone thinks he's a jerk, but no one's actually said. So I sort of feel sometimes that like I'm like, hello, does anyone else see this? Does anyone else see that this women's initiative program is bullshit? Excuse my French. And that we don't need more mentoring or whatever, right? And so um I worry that I am and I still have self-limiting beliefs that what I'm saying is correct, and worry about how people will perceive it because I am going against the grain.
Yes, yes.
And I have I was never really good of going against the grain, even when I was working in I was always a little bit of a rabble rouser, so feels
It is
feels
difficult.
yeah.
It is difficult, and it's a lot of the emperor has no clothes, exactly what you're saying with a
Yeah.
court who's a jerk, and you're like, okay, am I the only one to see that? I think, at some point as you mentioned, the evolution of your thinking and being and lifestyle, to your point, there is a bit of this. I'm not sure it makes sense, but everyone is doing it. So, if I don't do it, I'm going to look like a failure versus looking, I chose that purposefully. And, like with the transition I made, I can tell you so much gossips. I hear things coming back from friends and contacts. I'm just like, why do you care what I do? But people care because it makes them question what they do. And you not doing it is almost an insult.
Mm.
So there is something that you're right, there is something there. And when you mention your definition of success, which is having a career balance with taking care of your children, that's your definition, and that's awesome. And that's something I want to make sure everyone who hears, whether they're men or women or, you have children or not, your definition of success is your definition of success. The only
Yes.
thing that matters is that you're not being spoon-fed the others' definition of success, and maybe your authentic definition of success, oddly enough, align extremely well with. So good for you. You live in the right world and you're going to have a blast. But I think for most people, it is not the case. And
Yeah. Agreed. And I would add, and this is I would add that I do think that on the other end, so while the individual's kind of defining their own thing, I would love if I could, wave my magic wand and be the ruler of the world, I would propose, or I would set that we do place just as much value and on caregiving and self-care as we do on, I'll call it, profit making
mm,
efforts, because the only way you get to profit making efforts is through childcare and self-care, or not childcare, caregiving, whether it be old,
okay, yeah,
young, neighbor, your partner, what have you, and self-care. And what we've done is made those cost centers
Yeah.
in service of the profit making. And so anyone who is working in these, cost centers or allocating time in these cost centers, it's either free or low paid labor.
Yeah.
So it just from a balance sheet perspective, it to me, it is not sustainable and not whole. And you can talk now, you can connect it to what's happening in the environment, but even park that, that is what I would add to the definition of success.
Yeah, and it's always something that I found like dumbfounding is jobs that are the most important. Teacher,
Yeah, exactly.
uh, nurses, yeah, and these are low-paying jobs in comparison, to the jobs like we had in the corporate world. And I'm like, okay, who's bringing the most value? And I'm not talking financial value, I'm saying value. And, I think back to what I was saying a bit earlier. Why is it so dangerous for society to have people like you, like me, who are questioning? Because now you're not just questioning the definition of success, you're questioning the system and the capitalistic system we're living in. And trust me, I love my luxurious life. Everyone who knows me knows that I have expensive taste. So I'm absolutely not saying let's all live in the woods with one t-shirt. It's two different things. But the way it has been built, you have that vicious cycle that at every generation is driving us even more. Go ahead.
And I would also say that this isn't like a bash against capitalism, right? Because capitalism is a creation of our own imagination, and we decided what EBITDA stands for, right? And so why don't we could it, if we wanted to decide that capitalism in the same way that let me finish the sentence, that capitalism takes into consideration those other aspects, right? Just in the same way that we talk about full cost accounting, which is, thinking about cradle to cradle and what does it cost to dispose of a product from an environmental perspective, you can think about what does it cost,
Yeah.
or what does the value bring, and you can just price things differently.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we've gotten mixed up. But anyways, that's macroeconomics, and we
But
can
I think
bring ourselves back to the micro.
it is very much linked actually to what you're doing with Full Breaker and your mindset. Yes, I can look at it as a micro initiative with Jessica, but actually it's way more powerful with that. So you talk about that evolution from going with that probably conditioned mind of superwoman can have it all, with roles defined by someone else, and you have to play by someone else's rules. Of course, difficult to win a game that was written by someone else, but that's another story. And the life you're living now. So I'm curious a bit more about all that evolution came about, but also what do you see in the future? So you went through multiple phases. It was a bit like the 5 stage of grief, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now it's more, I assume, expansion. I know it's difficult you don't have a crystal ball, but what do you feel, or what is the next frontier? I know for me it's serenity. That's a tough one, serenity. But what is your next frontier? Maybe it's a better question.
For me, it's community building, the
Mhm.
next frontier. I, at BMO, I did change management. That was my thing. And like, I got into like, how do you do enterprise-wide transformation? And how do you change things almost top down? And I spent a lot of time thinking about how do I do this? Do you have to go in, like, is it a new style of a company, and is it a B Corp, or is it like whatever? And for me, that has felt very challenging. Well, for me, I'll park whether it's challenging or not. For me, what I'm attracted to is how do you do one by one? And how do you create a community? How do you create and connect individuals who are feeling the same thing? When you shine light on certain things, they were like, oh my God, yes, right? Like now I see it the same way you do. And how do we almost support one another in keeping the blinders on?
Yes.
Because every day is going to pose a new thing, whether you see something on your LinkedIn feed that makes you feel like you're worthless, or a call from your school's the school nurse that now you have to cancel your day, that the big presentation, whatever it is, things are going to arise and make you remind you of the thing that you're fighting against.
Yeah.
And, is there movement and is there change through grassroots evolution of how individual by individual, change the way that they're thinking? Yes. And that's where that to me is the next frontier. That's the, like, can you get, enough people kind of
Yeah.
in space?
So my next question is going to be, so why is living a life that kind of involves career, caregiving, self-care so radical in the society we're living now?
I mean, it is. It's funny. The girlfriend of mine, and who sort of works in this area as well, talks about, like, the fact that she takes pride in her career, in her career, but as well as working part-time so that she can do school pickup. For her, this is a radical act against the system. And so,
Mm.
yeah, it's interesting that you're touching on the radicalness of it. Everything propels us to this one sort of cohort, right? It's like, whether it's how you're taught in school, whether it's what movies you see or music or media,
Mhm.
or even our, the way we analyze company performance or gross domestic product. Everything is productivity, growth, more, wealth, power, status, obsessed.
Mhm.
So everything in the public realm puts power and wealth on a
Yeah.
pedestal. It's only in the private realm that we um, praise and value caregiving and self-care.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And so you're essentially going and being like, no, of course, you're
Yeah.
essentially, standing up and saying, oh yes, everything, every magazine that I see on the bookshelf in a bookstore or in the airplane, in the airport lounge, right, is completely full of shit, right?
Yeah.
Like, excuse my language, like,
Yeah.
that to me is quite a radical statement to um reject or call into question,
Yeah.
what the dominant culture is.
Yeah, yeah, it's almost an act of resistance, of rebellion. I
Yeah,
know it
yeah.
seems radical again to say that, but it is actually the case. And so one other question I have, obviously based on my own personal experience. So how do you deal with the stress, the anxiety, and your overall mental wellness? Because a lot of demands are made on you, and you're adding pressure by not, it's easier on the system to follow society. It
Right.
creates a lot of tension to actually to say no. It's more exhausting
Yeah.
emotionally, mentally, nervously. So how do you manage that?
Um, I would say a few ways. One was pulling myself out. So I was, born in Toronto, lived downtown, worked downtown. When we moved to Kelowna, which is, like, actually not a city, it's categorized as a town, because it's the population's 150, 170,000, and it's, the biggest city. It's the biggest city with a 5 hours drive, right? So, like, there's nothing. And there is almost this feeling, and now I have an office with massive flower decals. Like, there is this feeling of being removed. I'm not living in the forest, but I'm not in the hustle
Yeah.
bustle noise of downtown Toronto. And I
Yeah.
think that works a lot. And then, frankly, it's been an everyday, I call it a meditation. It's not like I'm sitting here, like, oming myself all day, but I journal every night around what filled my cup, and I see the patterns. What filled my cup was not what, it
Yeah.
takes to be a senior executive in a Fortune 500 company.
Mhm.
So journaling, we have a weekly gratitude journal that we do as a family, that we do every Friday night, and we've been going on it for 4 years now. And we go back and we read every year, like this week, last year, this week, 3 years ago, what have you. So it's things like that that show up in my day, in my week, that also kind of keep me grounded and focused.
Mhm.
Um, and then it's a lot of conversations within, I'll call it my community, right? So my folks that I have found that are like-minded, where I'm like, oh, I'm feeling this. And then they're like, yeah, but let's come back to, what are your centers? What's your focus? What is your truth? What is your definition of success, to use your words?
Yeah. Okay. That's very helpful, and we're almost already out of time. So I have one last question. So what changes would you like to see in society then, taking in consideration your evolution, taking in consideration your new philosophy? What would you require if you had that magic wand?
Ooh, ooh. Um, I would like to see women, particularly humans, I would say, released from this feeling of more, productivity, status, wealth, power, grind. I would like to see our systems, so, whether it be the office or our government, what have you, place um value and recognition that humans are both productive beings within society and reproducers or caregivers of those other humans within
Yeah.
society. Um, I mean, you look at what you get at, to be specific, you look at the wage that you get for taking off parental leave. It's just above the low income threshold, right? Like, so basically what we're saying is your value to us as society, as a reproductive, as a, as a procreator,
Yeah.
as a mini human incubator, is not as valuable to us as an incubator of a business.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, and knowing that you're gonna add someone, now you're supposed to live on less doesn't really make much sense either, like
Yeah, as well, but also, like, whether companies or governments or our society, like, humans are these resources, right? And you count how many of the resources and what's your output for them, right? And that output uh takes the labor, anyways, around, the caregiving as free and what have you. So um I would change that. So increased parental leave payments, subsidized childcare through organizations. And honestly, I would like put a cap, if I could, or whatever, that work ends at 5 or work ends at the eighth
yeah,
hour.
yeah,
Um, and the definition of work, and I know that that's not a popular opinion, because everybody should be free to go and
yeah.
pursue what they want. And what ends up happening is that you get this imbalance. Um, Anyways, that I haven't like fully fleshed out the model against. And I can see there's cracks in the arguments, but I think that there's something to be said about um how we as society encourage people to use their time.
Yeah, well, listen, if you look at Europe, the Nordics, France, like actually parental leave is exactly the same income that what you're making in as you're working. So there is no change. Actually, if you take your vacation, you actually make more money when you're in parental leave. So that's a different story. It's French. And you have a lot of support for childcare. You have a lot of financial support. So which is why also there's a lot of people having children. So I do think obviously the childcare elements and the education element of that as well, not just the childcare, but the education.
Totally. Yes. Yes. The time.
There is
For-
definitely a lot to be improved. But thank you so, so much, Jess, for taking the time to share your thoughts. It was very enlightening and really, really appreciate seeing you as always.
Oh, I love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh.